Okay, thanks everyone for coming for this session. We will talk about cryptocurrency market technology. And we will first do an introduction of each of ourselves, then we will ask a few questions. So how about you start first?
Me? Maybe ladies first?
Yeah. Okay, lady first.
Yeah.
Lady first.
Okay, no pressure. Hi, I'm Ainsley. I work at Enigma doing product and partnership strategy. Enigma is a protocol for secret contracts, which functions similarly to smart contracts, but the data inputs are encrypted. So this allows you to create apps that require private data to be computed over without revealing that data on-chain or revealing it to any third party. In a nutshell. I guess I can add one quick example to help clarify that. Like, for example, when you vote on-chain, your votes are revealed, which means that they can be subject to bribery or coercion, but you want to be able to prove that the votes are correct. So with Enigma, the votes are submitted and computed privately and then returned to the chain. The tally is returned to the chain. It's a quick example. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Justin Fisher. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a project called Veriblock. What Veriblock does essentially is we secure the world's blockchains using a new consensus protocol that we call proof of proof to inherit the hashing power of the Bitcoin network, or the most dominant chain's proof of work. So we seek out the world's greatest form of proof of work, and then we use our technology or deploy our technology, which allows other blockchains to inherit that hashing power. So that's who I am in a nutshell. Thank you.
I'm Reuben, the COO of Zcoin. We basically focus on two things. One, which is financial privacy. We use zero-knowledge proofs where we allow someone to take a coin, burn it up, and then redeem it at a later time with this new coin having no previous transaction history. So it removes the relationships of coins with each other. And the second pillar, I would say, is a decentralized proof of work, where we are going to be deploying a proof of work that is ASIC resistant, but at the same time has all the good characteristics of botnet resistance and fair distribution of coins. So yeah.
Hey, I'm Konstantin Richter, the CEO and founder of Blockdaemon. We're Nodes as a service company, so we sit a little lower in the stack than these guys. We provide first layer decentralization services. So we're the only multi-cloud, multi-protocol orchestration tool for blockchains in the market. What that means is we work with all the major protocols to deploy nodes in 3 simple clicks, and we allow them to be deployed across our multi-cloud infrastructure. We work with Google, Azure, DigitalOcean, AWS, and our own infrastructure. So we distribute nodes around the world and around territories, and then allow for a holistic network management tool for the protocols and networks to ensure that they actually have proper decentralization.
Okay, cool. I will make an introduction about myself as well. So I'm the CEO and founder of CoAlpha.ai. We built a reputable, smart crypto asset management platform. Basically, we utilize blockchain technology like distributed ledger to make sure what a token fund has their NAV, net asset value, written on the chain. So every performance is transparent, and we use smart contract to make sure the fiduciary duty between investment manager and the investor can be done, self-executed. And it's a application level thing, and we focus on investment. I guess we will spin into that topic later, and let's focus on the technology for the crypto market first. So, so everyone has introduced about your technology. I think it's kind of related to how people make distributed network and how to improve the protocol or algorithm to make the better chain solutions. So many people had this concept that chain, each block underlying chain has 3 important aspects: security, scalability, and efficiency. So the first question would be for each of you: how is your solution going to make impact on each of this aspect? Okay, Wang to go first.
I'll jump in there. So decentralization, security, these are important topics. We hear a lot about them all the time. There's a lot of debate. Some of it can get very contentious. So I'll try to stay away from those issues. But when you look at security, by its very nature, it's going to be expensive, right? If it's going to be generally, it's going to be inefficient, and it's probably going to be expensive. Otherwise, we wouldn't need locks at our doors. We wouldn't need Brinks trucks. So like what we like to say at Veriblock is, security is not free. It's going to cost money. There needs to be a cost associated. You need a lock on a door. You need a strong consensus algorithm to keep people from doing double spend attacks and things like that. We've just seen in the news, there's been recent announcements about a lot of 51% attacks. A lot of these things were completely underestimated, and we now have first-hand knowledge that there's real money that can be stolen. So just briefly, without deviating too much, for some of you in the audience who aren't quite sure what a 51% attack is, think of it this way. You deposit a coin you might have, just bread coin, and you deposit your bread coin on an exchange, and all the while, you have a mining network that's mining on the side in your closet somewhere, and it's building a longer chain than the one that exists. So you submit your money to the exchange, you then do a withdrawal of Bitcoin or another currency that is going to be more secure, and then after you receive your Bitcoin and it's confirmed, you then take your longer chain and you slap it on top of the existing chain, thereby turning those transactions back, and you basically just robbed a bank without a gun. So it's a real serious problem. There's a lot of different protocols and ways that people are addressing this issue, but what we do is proof of proof, and we think it's a novel idea, but I don't want to take too much of the panel's time. That's my issue with security.
Should I go next? So, yeah, great subject. I think the way I always start thinking about security and scalability is you can build blockchains either for speed or consensus, right? And so we're still at a very, very early stage of enabling technology and using blockchains, and most of the current solutions are, all not perfect by any means. And so what you see a lot now is either you have fairly centralized chains that have high throughput and scalability, so they tend to be able to manage an aspect of security depending on how you define it, right? So centralized chains means that you can have a centralized managed security in a centralized manner that might be more secure than a distributed security system even. But that said, you lose the context of decentralization, meaning that there's a single party which can actually impact what happens on that chain. And so a good example is, and I actually don't, I actually really like EOS. It's a great protocol, but they have 21 block producers. And it's a sort of group of people who could, in theory, define what happens on the chain. So there's it's not overly decentralized. These people can get together. They could kind of agree certain things that would make it unviable to run an efficient market on it. And so our solution is very focused on providing cheap nodes and making it easy for people to deploy nodes, because you don't want your nodes to be centralized, not just on an infrastructure, also on people who actually run nodes. EOS also is run exclusively on AWS, which is, again, most networks don't even know where they run on, because these node providers all run their own node and infrastructure, and then you got to do some research to actually see what network are they actually fully dependent on. And so again, we're on that layer of security specifically, and we can work with either, right? So, but what I think is interesting is we have a mainnet solution that connects, allows enterprises to do triple entry accounting, which is a fairly simple use case. Most enterprises have no interest in a decentralized security system. And so the question is, what does that even mean? Are enterprises even using blockchain? I mean, whatever we define as the current enterprise sort of tool sets for blockchains, none of them are really decentralized, right? So I think there's a political discussion to be had around what decentralization means to us as the blockchain community, and we touched on it prior, which is there's these actually 4 layers really. Layer 0 is on the ISP level even, right? So blockchains live on the internet. The internet isn't decentralized either. There's actually, if you go into what that looks like, you'd be amazed. And then you have the sort of our layer, the first layer, which is nodes, infrastructure, which is where Blockdaemon sits on. Then you have the protocols, and then you have the applications. And each one has a different degree on how decentralization affects them. The only reason why that's interesting is because the SEC just stated in the case of Ethereum that because Ethereum is decentralized, it's not a security. So you can start to think about, okay, so we need to probably define what decentralization means going forward. But that's sort of the area we're focused on.
So one of the things that we're talking about, like with decentralization, especially with proof of work, is where the computational hash rate is. Like, of course, with Bitcoin, now there's more concerning where, they're saying that Bitmain possibly has more than 51% of the hash rate. And, basically when all these proof of work algorithms, they are kind of dominated by ASICs right now, where only people who buy these specialized machines can actually participate in the security of the network. There's several sort of different views on this. Some people say we should just embrace ASICs and have like an open source type of ASIC solution. That's also workable, but I find that right now with the economies of scale with Bitmain and all this very large companies that are already ahead of the game, we are quite far from seeing that. So our approach at Zcoin is to have decentralized security in the sense that everyone can participate by not requiring specialized hardware. You can just mine with your home computer, with your existing computer. And one of the good things, especially we are not a smart contract platform. When you have decentralized proof of work, you also get fair distribution, because that means not just the people with the specialized miners are going to get the new coins that come into the network, but anyone in their house has a chance to get a part of these new coins. And I think that's a kind of an overlooked thing about like decentralized proof of work and why it's important. So.
We have kind of a slightly different approach to this question, but for us, I think when you ask questions about scalability and efficiency, we think that those are also questions about usability and questions of how decentralized apps can be performant with centralized apps. And one of the things that these applications are going to need is access to user data. But for us, it's important, one of our core principles is that people own their own data and that these apps maintain decentralization like all the way through, from the beginning to the end. So if you're thinking of like a decentralized Uber, which is what like a decentralized app that's successful, I would think would be great, but it's going to need access to your location data. It's going to need access to your ride history. It's going to need access to that for the driver, for the rider. And so for me, in the future, what I think Enigma should be able to enable is for this data to be something that the apps can use, but that remains in the ownership of the person that the data originated with. So that's kind of a different approach to this question of scalability, but I think it's one that we shouldn't lose sight of.
Okay, cool. So basically, besides the common talk about the security, scalability, and efficiency, I think there are many things that you guys talk about, like how to get things done in a very efficient way, and how to actually protect people's privacy. That's a very big concern. And another related question is like many people say blockchain technology without a token, without economic incentive, is going to make a very small impact. So I want to ask you guys' view on that. Like, do you think your project need a token, and why is that, and how would that help you?
Yeah, why don't I start? Because we're a little different. So we're a venture-backed company. We very consciously decided not to do a token sale. Obviously, we don't run a blockchain. We're a developer tool, right? So for us, it's our mission is to bring cloud orchestration tools to the blockchain world, right? So there's amazing tools that manage very complicated distributed databases and infrastructures that we're using in the cloud space. If you run Salesforce CRM, you run, that they run thousands of nodes for a CRM system that are pretty well distributed. There's tools like Heroku, Engineered, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're in that world, right? So we're providing first-rate cloud technology for the blockchain space. The blockchain space is technically, very far behind in terms of sophistication around tooling and DevOps, really. Anything that's network management is, we're kind of in the Stone Ages still in blockchain land. And so for us, but we support all the major protocols, and those are all currencies. So what I would say is that without a tokenization model, then the need for a blockchain, you could probably find a different database infrastructure to run more efficiently, right? So the token really is a metric of value that's cryptography, whatever the word is, defined, and you can use it to connect with a network in an easy way, right? So it's really just a sort of, we use tokens when you log into your online banking now, like kind of that can be a token. And so I wouldn't see how you can use a blockchain and the self-sustaining mining component token in a way without a token. I don't think that's useful.
I think for us, it's pretty simple. I mean, we've always talked about, what's a killer app for blockchain? A lot of people talk about smart contracts. We haven't actually seen very many useful dApps. Like CryptoKitties probably was the one with the largest use case, I suppose. But we are a currency, and so that means we're actually the original use case, which is payments, where it's a system where Bitcoin is trying to fill, and we are of course trying to improve on that with privacy on top of that. But one of the problems with all this payments or competing cryptocurrencies is that there has been an issue with bridging that into the real world, where everyone's just using this as an investment platform. They're not using it for payments. They're using it for hodling, and I feel that's an issue, especially if you have a system with both proof of stake and masternode system where you're just incentivized to actually just hold the coin. And for us, we have a relatively high inflation rate because we think that if you want to be a currency, you need as many people to have it. But one of the things that we're working to bridge into the real world is to actually work with existing payment solution systems. For example, our founder is actually from Thailand, and there's actually a system called PromptPay, where they have a universal QR code system, which actually allows, it's actually endorsed and spearheaded by the government, where you can use this QR code and pay anything to it, Visa, Bank Pay, and QR codes. So what we are trying to do is to actually allow, we also actually run exchange, so what we can actually do is we can allow Zcoin to be paid to that same PromptPay system, and then the merchants would get Thai baht in return. And that would allow the actual real use case, at least as a start. I mean, it would be nice if we don't ever have to deal with fiat, but in this reality, we still need those fiat gateways. And I think integrating into existing payment solution systems are very important right now, rather than just talking about pure crypto to crypto.
I'll just keep going in order here. So tokenization, incentivization, if you want to incentivize somebody to do something, you have to give them an incentive. We have a little joke in the office, Max and I, we talk about communist chain. And it would be a new blockchain that we launch where everybody would mine for free because it's noble. Transactions would be free and nothing would cost anything. And put that up against a chain where you have an incentivization mechanism. People do things because they're incentivized. Some people don't do things because they're incentivized. All you need to do is read about B.F. Skinner, a great behaviorist, and you learn a lot about the incentivization mechanism. So a blockchain that doesn't have an incentivization mechanism is going to be hard-pressed to properly secure itself. So from our perspective, it's pretty simple. Proof of proof, for example, which is a new protocol that we've invented, uses an incentivization model wherein people are incentivized to do transactions that provide security on behalf of a blockchain. So by incentivizing people to do something on behalf of the blockchain, it's a way for a blockchain to kind of enslave humans to do their bidding. So the AI has a new tool which it can use to rapidly go, and it is incentivization and tokenization. So as we talk about AI and its potential dangers, think of what happens when you give it a decentralized, trustless, transparent network where it can wield its power through incentivization mechanisms and what it can do in regards to getting people to do other things for it. I mean, we do it every day when we prove we're human beings on the internet. We click pictures and we have to pick out the cars. I didn't get paid for that, but I'm incentivized because I need to get to the website and I have to prove that I'm a human. So when you look at these types of mechanisms and you look at things that have scaled, it's all happened because they had incentive mechanisms. So incentivization is a huge component that a blockchain, I couldn't call it a blockchain unless it had an incentivization mechanism. But I don't want to get into a blockchain debate, so I'll pass it on.
I'm paranoid enough when I open my MetaMask. I don't need to be worried about blockchain AIs controlling me. Right. I mean, you mentioned something earlier about when you brought up this question about transparency versus privacy, and I think that's a sign of like this challenge that blockchains have had from the beginning, which is it's people who are very privacy-minded who want autonomy, and way to get that is through transparency. And I mean, the connection between this and token distribution is nebulous, but one thing that I've noticed in my experience is that having token distribution means that you have this amazing, huge, and engaged community that I think is kind of the foundational layer that you need for something to be truly decentralized on a governance level as well. So that's another perspective on it that I think is important to keep in mind.
One thing, if I could just add on something, on the infrastructure level, it's interesting because running a blockchain is actually very expensive because they're decentralized and they tend to grow in size over time. So what we see a lot is that, you know, the companies who are currently sucking up the most value from blockchains are the Amazons, the Googles, and the Microsofts. You know, they love this because a blockchain is 50 times the cost of a normal network infrastructure. And so to actually use the inherent incentivization tools in blockchains to actually fund underlying infrastructure for decentralization is also very interesting. And so we're spending a lot of time looking at data arbitraging, the cost, you know, of data across all those different platforms to actually then use an infrastructure that pays for itself, right? And so right now, so you could say there's this very famous book in the Valley called Capitalism in the Innovation Society. And so the question is, what does capitalism look like in the tokenization society, right? And so then you go deep into that subject.
Yeah, actually, that's very interesting. I've been thinking about this topic for a while, and because we're doing investment, we're trying to think as a currency, as a token, what kind of impact it make to the human world. And I think one thought we recently have is that eventually this digital token thing may not be just for the human world. It may be a big thing for the IoT, Internet of Things. So consider everything like energy, like every transportation, what is kind of service can be done using Internet of Things. Then all of these things are going to exchange value using the token in a sense. And with that, it's going to, you may really have a huge AI who can drive and demand everything to service for its own good, right? So that's scary, but also interesting. Okay, so let's get back on this technology topic. And actually, we have been talking about blockchain as a revolutionary technology, and it's going to make huge impact. And we have been talking about there's no killer app besides being as a global currency right now. So what's your view on what's the necessary technology, or what's your own technology going to make this new killer app happen soon, and what time you think it is?
I'd love to take this question, and I'll be as brief as I can. All one needs to do is look at a legacy chain of custody model. You have digital evidence, it's put into a custodianship of human beings, and the longer that evidence, that digital evidence, for example, body camera from a police officer, the longer that digital evidence sits in the hands of human beings, the more corruptible it becomes. So here we have a situation where digital evidence is put in a chain of custody, governed and managed by humans, and the costs get more expensive over time. There's more audit trails, and this becomes a very expensive and less secure model. In a blockchain of custody, if you take a look at a blockchain of custody, we can capture that data in an instant from the body camera, taking hashes of it, posting it to a blockchain in real time. And now the moment it hits the blockchain, it becomes more secure over time. And you don't need an audit trail because once it's on the blockchain, it's permanent, it's immutable. So just think about that dichotomy in regards to killer applications. Putting digital evidence of anything, particularly in the space that you're in, things of that sort, that's a huge, huge killer application just for one example.
I know Reuben has a good answer to this. I think that from my perspective, I think something that may not be the killer app but would be necessary to have killer apps is going to be an identity solution that allows people to maintain ownership over their own identity. I think that speaking of nightmare scenarios, the blockchain could very well be one if everything about your identity is public. So that's something that I feel very invested in and I think is very important in this ecosystem.
Yeah, I concur. I think the cypherpunk movement initially was all around, privacy and how much information you choose to reveal of yourself, and I think that's quintessential cornerstone of what blockchain should be. From our perspective, obviously the infrastructure part I think is really important. By no means do we have the computational power nor the ecological power to actually allow all these protocols that raised money to scale and function, right? So right now, if all the 1,000 tokens and protocols that are in existence would achieve their goals, you know, there's no way we can ever, as a planet, sustain the level of energy nor the computational power. If we combine Google and Amazon, all those guys, we're not even close, right? So a lot of highway and distribution methods need to be invented for that world to exist.
Well, I think, like, you know, we always talk about scalability on a technological standpoint, and we always, you know, ignore the fact that right now cryptocurrencies, blockchain technologies, they're not easy to use. And a lot of the time we know, a lot of times we're just too focused on the science of like zero knowledge proofs and all this TPS, and we don't actually really have a scalability problem right now. What's actually a bigger problem is usability. Like, if you take a look at, you know, Zcoin or even Zcash or Monero, all these are privacy coins, and they were quite horrible to use. And I do think that, you know, we really need a better user experience that guides us through the process of storing our private keys or, you know, interacting with exchanges. And right now we aren't seeing that. We're still kind of the early stage. And I think for mainstream adoption to actually happen, it has to be really easy to use. And hopefully, I think that's something I feel that people kind of overlook when we're talking about technology, large block sizes, side chains, Lightning Network. And I'm looking at it, Lightning Network is so difficult to use. So I do think that, you know, just really simple changes in how the user interface is guiding the user through the process is what we at Zcoin are also trying to do as well.
Okay, cool. We have less than 1 minute left. How about each of us make a recommendation on what technology book or magazine or blog you like to read, and maybe a coin to buy or short. Okay.
Well, I'm super biased. I've been involved in Poet and MAD, which MAD is the MAD Network token, which is a privacy-first token that I like a lot. In terms of books, I referenced you know, Capitalism and the Innovation Economy. I think that's a brilliant book. It's been 20 years, but it talks about value in a really interesting manner that I think transfers nicely into the space.
I don't want to talk because I'm biased, I would say Zcoin, but I mean, like the privacy coins are, because, you know, like things like Monero, Zcash, they all, I would say, really real use cases. So even in addition to Zcoin, it'll be, if you're invested in cryptocurrency in general, it'll be always nice to have a little basket of privacy coins, but I'm not going to make any concrete recommendations there.
I wouldn't particularly recommend a coin per se, but I think everybody is going to hear a lot more about proof of capacity. And a proof of capacity, quite simply, is where you're using your hard drive. Speaking to your narratives about decentralization and people being able to get hardware to do this mining, hard drives are readily available. Everybody's got one. And the idea, quite simply, is you generate a bunch of lottery tickets and you post them onto your hard drive. So the more hard drive space you have, the more lottery tickets you can make, and the greater chance you have of being elected when the lottery goes off to make the next block. I know that's a mouthful, but proof of capacity is going to be a really, really big deal.
Buy Enigma. No, but book is a great question. I'm going to recommend a book that has nothing to do with blockchain at the surface. I just finished The Three-Body Problem a few months ago, and I thought it was an excellent book, especially when thinking about what it's like to relate to beings that we don't have like the same mind structure as, which might be interesting when we start seeing a lot of automation and AI and Internet of Things. So it's fun. You probably read enough blogs about blockchain anyway.
Okay, cool. Thanks. That concludes our session.